Reverend Canon Cornelia Eaton Yinshia Ashihin Ashli Ashlishni Bashichin Nake the Ne Dashanalid Ashche Dashache Egate Eha Asundishli. My name is Reverend Canon Cornelia Eaton. I come from the Salt Clan people, which is my maternal clan. My father's clan are the Mud Clan people. And my paternal grandfather's clan are the Mexican people. And my maternal grandfather's clan are the Red Street people. And so those are the 4 clans of which I come from. And the 4 clans is what helps me to identify who I am and also acknowledge who my relatives are in Granite, which is Navajoland. So Granite is a large geographic area. It's the size of West Virginia. And we have an area mission there at this point. We're located up in Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico, right in the Four Corners area of those 3 states. And so that's where I come from. I live in the area of the New Mexico region, which is in Farmington, New Mexico. That's where the Diocesan office of the Episcopal Church in Navajoland is located. And I also live not far from the Diocesan office. I live maybe about 6 miles to the west of Farmington. I live on the Navajo Indian Reservation. And there's a church there called St. Michael's Episcopal Church. It's a small Hogan church where I grew up and I was raised in that community by my elders and by my mother, my family, who helped me raise me up into this place of ministry that I am so grateful to be a part of and to serve. And I have to tell you, saying yes does take you to a lot of places out into the world, even as far as New Zealand, among the Maori people, which have also similar historical way of history as the Native Americans do in this part of the continent of this world. So I want to say ahehet means thank you in Dene. And earlier when I addressed myself, when I said addressed you, and I said ya'at yah is the sky, and ya'at is the inside of my being, because I could feel in here, and is giving back to you. So that was the way I was taught when I was in my younger age, was that it's a very sacred word, and when we say it, that we mean it, because it means we're relational people. So ya'at to you. I also learned later on in my life, as I was growing and learning so much about my own spiritual path, that there was an elder who also taught me that ya'at means when we shake hands, I lend out my hand to you, and you grasp my hand. And usually they say that the elderly women, the maternal, put their hand like so with the palm up. And what this palm represents is our Earth Mother, the Earth Mother. So when I get groups to come and visit us, and we acknowledge each other, and I say, Yat you're welcoming each other into the palm of Mother Earth, but also the palm of being in relationship with one another. And then this hand means from the sky. So sometimes it means Earth Mother and Father Sky. They come together and they become in relational people together. So those teachings are developed over time. I didn't catch it all at once when I was younger and growing up, but the more it was taught, the more it was repetitive, the more there was prayer involved, and the more that my elders welcomed me in such a way was very meaningful. And I think sometimes the world is missing that. And we live in a world that's so divided and chaotic that we forget to live into this kind of relationship that God has given us to, as gift, has given us to live into such a way. So I'm very grateful to my elders, to my grandmothers, and to my grandfathers for teaching me these values that represent who we are as the Diné people in Navajoland. The other thing that I wanted to share was that our relationship, I'm beginning with my relationship with my community and all my elders in the Episcopal Church in Navajoland, and also my family. My mother is from New Mexico as well, and she helped raise me. She was lay pastor for almost 40 years, so she was part of my huge upbringing. My dad was a deacon in the Episcopal Church as well, and he was ordained as one of the first deacons in the Navajoland back into the 1970s. And then later on, I've had other elders who became priests and deacons, and has been a really wonderful blessing to a part of my life and my upbringing. I come from a people who are medicine people, like medicine man and medicine woman. So my mother's side were medicine beauty way chanters. And my dad's side also had some chanters in the family. And so I became, instead of becoming a chanter, a beauty way chanter, or being called into a traditional chanter, I was called into becoming a priest. So I blend the both and together and use my ministry as a priest and the teachings and learnings of the elders, the medicine people, into one whole holistic way of being a priest in the Episcopal Church. So the one thing that I wanted to bring up is that in my upbringing, I was told that I'll begin with the spirituality part of the topic, because I think it's the first and foremost of who we are as a community. And so our spirituality was taught through the teachings of what we call the Beauty Way basket. And this Beauty Way basket represents the universe. It represents Hojon, the Beauty Way, to live in balance and to live in harmony. That's our spirituality. And it also parallels to how we live out Jesus' shalom. So Jesus' shalom and the Diné way of Hojon are parallel. They walk side by side. And I think learning from each spirituality is a way that the Diné Episcopalians live their life as Christians. So it's a both and, there's not an either or. So that's what brings us balance, because our faith practices of both traditions and cultures bring us together. So when I was growing up, the Beauty Way basket is used in a lot of our ceremonies, particularly the Beauty Way ceremony, which is when a patient has been unbalanced, maybe not having a difficult time in life, and life is just out of balance. There's a Beauty Way ceremony that sings you, chants you back into harmony, back into Hojon. So this is the Beauty Way basket that is used. And what is used in here is we use white cornmeal and yellow cornmeal. White cornmeal is the male corn, and yellow is the female corn. So you have male and female to balance our life way. And so this Beauty Way basket, the way I was taught and understanding of this is that this is also known as a wedding basket. So when you have two people who get married, they eat yellow corn and white cornmeal out of this basket that's made of like corn mush. And they both eat together and they feed each other. So in other words, maybe I've seen in Western culture, like you know, when two people get married, they feed each other the cake at the reception. But the reception and everything happens inside the sacred ceremony of inside a hogan, which I call our ceremonial hogan. It's usually a home made out of cedar, and it's plastered with mud, and the ceiling is like carved. It's like a dome, and in the middle is the chimney. So, and then you have the 4 sacred directions, and then the ground is always dirt ground. So when you walk in with your moccasins are either barefoot, you're already connected to the earth when you walk in. And that's the whole purpose why our hogan is structured on the dirt ground. We don't put concrete down or anything like that, because the concrete will disconnect us from the earth mother. So we walk either barefoot or with our moccasins onto the ground, and we acknowledge her, and we say, hello, earth mother. Which is hello, Father Sky. And then we say hello to the 4 directions, to the 4. So everything is acknowledged around us. And so when we do that, then they say that the earth and all the elements know that we're in reverence. We're practicing reverence. We're practicing spirituality. We're practicing hojong. They say this people means that they know that we're present with them. So, in that way, we learn how to be present with ourself, our very being. Because when we don't learn how to do those things, then we don't learn how to take care of ourselves too, in such a way. Because we are made of the soil, Earth Mother. So when a youth group comes out to visit the garden, let's say, or our place of homeland, I like to share with them that for them to put their hand on the earth in Dinepikea, which maybe some of you might have been there. I've heard many been there. And then those who haven't been there, it's a vast land of just open space. I mean, the trees don't block your view. You could see 100 miles just all over around you. And so when they experience this new place, it helps them to see the world, their surroundings, in a whole different new way. So when they put their hand on the ground, I tell them to look at the color of the Earth Mother, and then look at your hand. And then I say to them, what color is, both of you? And they say, we're the same. I said, that's right, we're the same. We're related. So even you are people of the soil. You, when you start being a part of a community, you learn to be relatives with each other. And so when they walk away, I hope, even for the older people, when you leave the 4 sacred mountains of Navajoland, I hope that you leave transformed. So those of you who haven't been there yet, I hope this is an invitation to welcome you there and visit Dinepikea, and to see how we can become more of a relational people together as we carry out the mission and ministry of Jesus, Shalom together. Jesus is hojong. So, and I think that might have been a little sermon, maybe a little homily, but I can't help. However, back to the basket. So everything that I shared is this basket. This is a relational basket. And if you see here, there's an opening here. This opening goes towards the east. I'm kind of disoriented here at the moment, but I'm not sure which way. Okay, great. So the east, this basket would sit towards the east, because the eastern doorway is where this first sun comes to us every morning, where the dawn light comes and just beams right into our new way of becoming, beams into our lives, beams into our homeland. And so that's the opening doorway. So then when we move around, this would be example of Deneh Bikea too. So when you go to Deneh Bikea, you're actually coming in from the eastern doorway of the Four Sacred Mountains. And the Four Sacred Mountains, this middle star area represents that, the Four Sacred Mountains. So the first sacred mountain is Cisnagini, which is White Shell Mountain, and it's located in Alamosa, Colorado. The second sacred mountain is Turquoise Mountain, which is Do Sontze, and it's located near Granite, New Mexico, near Albuquerque. And then the third sacred mountain is to the west, and that one is Dog Ooslid, and that sacred mountain is San Francisco Peaks, and that's located by Flagstaff, Arizona. And then the fourth sacred mountain is the Benetah, which is Big Sheep Mountain, and that's the sacred mountain to the north, and that one is located near Durango, Colorado. So as you can see how vast the sacred mountains are, far apart from each other, but still they're in relationship, because the Deneh have a relationship with that part of the land very deeply. And so the beginning of this, right in the middle, you'll notice like a spiral. And that spiral is the emergence. So when everything is spiral coming into being. So creation is created. And then these black area here, the design is known as like the clouds, the rain, the mist. So I've been hearing that you all have been getting like rain, and gratitude for that, because the elements are speaking to us and blessing us with moisture. And so those are the cloud beams. I see some cloud beams outside. And then this whole red part is the rainbow. It's the Hojon, it's the beauty way that covers us all. And it's the protector. It's what beauty way is, it protects us. And then the outside here, the design on the outside is the holy people. So in the Christian way, you would say maybe perhaps the saints. They pray for us, we pray for them. Protectors, like St. Michael's is a warrior. Like in the chapel where I serve, St. Michael's is adorned with eagle feathers, really large eagle feathers. And he's standing next to Elder Mary. And Elder Mary is dressed with a traditional, what we would call a chief blanket. And it's like a rug blanket. And so you have your warrior, St. Michael's, and you have your Elder Mary. And right in the middle of those two is Jesus. And he's wearing his corn pollen, his corn stalk stole. And his corn stalk stole is both white corn and yellow corn. And so Jesus comes to us in that kind of way. And so that's how the people in Deneh Bikea have a relationship with Jesus, because Jesus brings us together as one community, and that God is our sacred, holy, divine one. Because in Navajo, we don't have a terminology for God, but we do know how to acknowledge God. We say Diyin Yot E. Diyin is sacred. It means Diyin means holy. Yot E means the Almighty One, the holy and sacred one, Almighty One. It's bigger. It's just, it's unexplainable. There's no words. And I think there's similarity with the Hebrew, right? There's no word for God. There's no word for God for the Deneh. Only we just say Yat E and the Yot E. God is the divine is much greater and is with us. So when I say that, I think about, wait a minute, that's like incarnation. God is with us. It is not far. So the people are, my community and my people are very incarnational people. I think we live out the incarnation year-round, not just December when it's Advent and we're getting ready for the incarnate, but it's year-round all the time. And the important thing is we pay attention. All the time, we pay attention. We just don't ever know when the great surprise might happen and might have just went right before our eyes. So that was always the teaching of our people too, the elders. And so the saints, and then the outside is the universe. It's forever, it's infinite, it doesn't end. So Beauty Way doesn't end, it's forever, it's ongoing. So when we hold this up, it's like your palm. So I'm holding Beauty Way. So when the people come up and get their bread and communion, I would imagine that they're holding the universe in their hand, and they're taking the universe that will feed them, their spirituality. So this is how this sacred wedding basket is used, and this represents the universe that we share together. And so when I hold this like this, it looks like a bowl, and the eastern doorway is towards the east. So I think there was also in the Christian that says that Jesus always comes to us from the east. There's a story, there's a scripture readings that Jesus came from the east and is always welcoming us. It's new life all the time. So that's the way that we can also understand our spirituality with the Christian faith spirituality, and we live into that. So when I hold this up like this, and let's say I'll go outside and I'll hold it up to the sky, and the sky, everything is just shaped like this as well. It's how we imagine it and see it. It's like a dome. So this is the universe in which we share and live together. And this is why the Beauty Way is really important. I like to also teach that when we hold a Beauty Way basket, we hold it like as if it was a baby with deep care. Because even here, this could also represent your belly button. It's where life happens. The life way enters. And that's where relationship is deep and strong. So this represents life way. And there's in the church at St. Michael's in which I serve, there's like a little yarn, like a material in here. And when I face it and show it to the people, I said, what does this look like? And they say, it looks like a belly button. I said, exactly. That's what it's supposed to mean. So it's life way, it's giving.
Thanks.
So in essence, that would be a crash course on Diné spirituality. But for you to experience it, you have to be a part of the spirituality, the practice. So this is where I'll move into the ministry of what we're doing. So, but before I get into the ministry, I think I'll share a little bit about history. The history of my people is both very beautiful and both brings also some trauma. Early in 1964, my elders, my ancestors were rounded up in the Canyon de Chelly of Arizona and all over of Navajoland by the U.S. Cavalry. And so when they were gathered together and force marched over 400 miles to Fort Sumner, which is near the state line near Texas, they were encamped there for nearly 5 years. I think it was 1864, they were encamped there, and then they had to sign a treaty in 1868 saying that they're going to abide by the federal rules, the federal law. And one of those things, one of those negotiations were that the children would be sent to boarding school, and they would learn the Western ways, and they would learn about Christianity, and that they were going to do away with their Navajo culture, their language, their spirituality, and they were going to learn it in a way that was going to be Christian. And so most of the Dene children, they went to boarding schools. Some had very traumatic experiences, and some say they had some good experiences. And so, but both ends, that was part of, colonialism. And our people today are still affected by that. And so part of that time of taking my ancestors on the long walk, there were children who were little, who tried to get to the long walk, but probably most died because they weren't able to handle the winters that they were marching in. There were women who were pregnant who couldn't keep up, and so they had to end their lives. And so the warriors tried to do what they can to keep the elders up to marching all the way to Quilde, which is in Navajo, it's called the place of suffering. And so they were imprisoned there for a long period of time. But the one thing that I do know that from the stories, they said that they never stopped praying. They were always faithful. They kept the ceremonies, and they would pray that one day they were going to come back to the Four Sacred Mountains. And so when they did finally come back to the Four Sacred Mountains in 1868, they, as soon as they first saw the Four Sacred Mountain, they said the women and the people fell to the ground, and they were crying with joy, and they were so happy to see one of the sacred mountains that was so familiar to them, because when they were in the encampment, it was an area where it was just flat land. There was no mountains, no anything, no trees. It was just, just brushes here and there. They couldn't adapt and live to that kind of life. So, and it makes sense, because sometimes, like certain things, like trees, like they grow in certain areas, right? And they're made for that part of the world. And when you're not able to, like if you live and move in a different place, it's hard to adjust and adapt, because my people's food intake was different from, they live off the land. So we had deer, sheep. Sheep is one of our most spiritual food that we still have today. That was the first and foremost part of our livestock, sheep and horses. And so, so when they didn't have all that, the kind of foods that they needed for their body, they got sick easy. And so they were given foreign foods like coffee. I think, if I remember, they were just given to them like in beans, and they didn't know how to make coffee, so they ate it. And because they weren't taught how to eat coffee, and so, how to brew coffee. So they thought it was like beans, and they would boil it and they eat it, and they got sick. So things like that were very foreign to them. and a lot of them died there at the encampment. So, and then of course a lot of illnesses came upon them as well. So when they went back to 4 sacred mountains, they started eating healthy and right again, living off the land, and they got their health back. But then over the years, the federal government started giving out rations like flour and like lard and different kinds of canned foods, processed foods. And the processed foods is what kind of wasn't adapting, but we had to learn how to eat processed foods. But back in the days, the people were always out herding sheep. They were out with the land. They were running. They were having ceremonies. They were just, very active. And so had to learn how to adapt to a new way of life. So a lot of people from that had caused a lot of what we call grief trauma. And to this day, the people still live with grief trauma. And so out of that, our ministry in Navajoland is to meet the needs of our community. We help them with their spiritual walk, their grief, any kind of needs that to make sure that we're there for them spiritually. And over the years of the history of Navajoland, I think the missionaries, Episcopal missionaries, set up their little ministries in each of the regions. So we had Good Shepherd Mission, that was actually an orphanage. And because I heard that a lot of people at that time were hit with the big flu that happened that very first time. And so a lot of the children had lost their parents to the flu pandemic. And so the reason part of the Good Shepherd Mission was it became an orphanage for that purpose, and also to meet the needs of children who had no family. And then of course where I come from in San Juan Mission area, there was a hospital there that was built in 1922. And that was also during the first pandemic where was, to meet the needs of the medical needs of the Navajo people there in that area. Today, that hospital is known as the Hojon Center, where I am a program director for the Hojon Birue Center. And part of our ministry there is really to focus on recovery, grief, from intergenerational trauma. And so we, again, meet the needs of the community there. And then, of course, most of you have visited St. Christopher's Mission in Bluff, Utah. And that was also a school, and it was also a clinic there, and met the needs of the people on the Navajo reservation. So there was like nurses and missionary doctors and who all came out to be a part of that. And then of course priests came over time to help with the spiritual part of of the people. So we learned how to come together as a community. We do our ritual, much like we're ritualistic people. So I don't think becoming Episcopalians was very difficult for us because we gathered around rituals. Just like I shared with you, we gather in our ceremonies with rituals using our corn pollen. We build a fire. We participate as a community. Everybody is involved. So the people started to grow their spirituality. Then over time, we became an area mission. The Episcopal Church decided to create an area mission in Navajoland, which we were created from the Diocese of Rio Grande, the Diocese of Arizona, and the Diocese of Utah, which made the area mission. And so we were an area mission. The hope was to build up Navajo leadership, Navajo priests, and we did have a Navajo bishop. His name was Stephen Plummer. And so And he passed on back in, I think it was 2005 and so then we had assisting bishops over the years, and then back in 2010, Bishop David Bailey was elected our next bishop. And Bishop David, as many of you know, was our bishop for 13 years, and he retired just last year, and just recently, this past week, Bishop Dave passed away. And so Navajoland today grieves, and so I sort of come with you with a grieving heart, but also a heart that will help us to move forward together as we spread the gospel to one another and share in relationship. So that was how the area mission was created, was from these 3 dioceses. And we did, Navajoland did raise up Navajo leadership. We have 5 priests, now 5 active Navajo priests today. We have 3 elders who are retired priests, and then we have some non-native priests who come and help us in each of one of the regions as well. So we're continuing to move forward and do our ministry. But just recently, as you may have heard, that we were approved to become a missionary diocese, so that by the General Convention, and that what the missionary diocese will do for us is help the Navajo people either elect or select a bishop that will reflect the values and the traditions of the Navajo people, rather than having a bishop appointed to them by the House of Bishops. That this would give the Navajo people the autonomy to create their own process. So that is part of the ministry that we're going to be doing right now. However, our ministry really focuses on the healing ministry. We have ministries around healing and reconciliation. The Hojon is part of that. The Beauty Way is a part of that. And we've, like, over the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, we were hit terribly there on the Navajo Nation. There were only a few of us who gathered food together. We had shipments of food because part of the Navajo Nation wasn't getting some of the food distributions from the Navajo tribe, so we stepped in to help meet the needs where our area wasn't getting the food sources that they needed and resources. And so our people really came together, clergy, the laity, and we stepped out of our buildings. As scary as that was, we stepped out of our buildings and we started delivering food throughout the Navajo Nation. And the way we did that was because of partners like you and partners throughout the Episcopal Church who sent us funds to do this ministry. And we probably, together as a community, saved many lives. And we brought people to Christ. And that is a deep ministry that really really sticks with us today, because before that, we were a community that was just based in our regions, but now our folks are beginning to move out into their areas and meeting people. And we don't only minister to Episcopalians. We meet other folks who are of different faith and welcome them, and because we realize that we got to do this ministry together as a whole and not separately. Because when we do our ministry separately, then we can't meet the needs of the people that Jesus has called us to to minister to. So that is our Beauty Way ministry, and we bring healing and wellness and wholeness through recovery ministries, through the food ministries. We still continue with food ministries. As a matter of fact, I think tomorrow there was supposed to be another food shipment that the people are going to be coming together to do. And then we're trying to help raise up our laity leadership, because we're moving into a model of what we call mutual ministry, total ministry. And that's the ministry of the baptized. And so when we empower the people to do their ministry and educate them, then they become part of that healing community too. So that the priest then is able to do the things that the priests can do, but also to work side by side with one another. And so again, creating a ministry that will value our culture, our tradition, our way of life, our spirituality. And so as we continue to move forward, I think that we have a whole lot of ministry ahead. And I'm very grateful to be a part of this ministry that the people in Dinypikea is working so hard to do every day and meeting the people's needs. And so when I go back to Dinypikea, out of like a place that I'm not familiar with, and I go back into the sacred mountains, and I could like literally when you fly into Durango or Albuquerque, right away you're like, you feel the sense of like protection, relief, like I'm home again. But there are times when you have to leave the home again, but you're always brought back. So what that meant is the people said that you're always going to be tied to the umbilical cord of the Earth Mother in Dinypikea. You're always going to long for home. And even when you leave, even temporary, you got to do what God is calling you to do. But when you come home, that pull is always there. So I always thought about my mom when one day she told me, I said, "Mom, what did you do with my umbilical button when it dried up and fell off?" She said, "Oh, we buried it right there by the church doorway." And so I was like, okay. I said, what was the purpose for that? Again, she said, so you always come home to the people. I had no idea I was going to become a priest. But I do know that when I come back to the Four Sacred Mountains, it's been a joy and a blessing to be a part of a wider community, the larger universe that we're sharing together. So that's the prayer. I mean, well, I guess it was a prayer story, right? I mean, it's what I know, and it's how it comes from the heart, and it's how we tell our stories. Each of the Diné tell their stories differently. It's each region is different. Even the dialects that sometimes when we say a word in a different way, sometimes it's different in a different dialect. So when I was sharing with the community one time, and I said, just think about it this way. There's no right or wrong. It just means that you were brought up in a different way that was spiritual for you, and that's how this community wanted you to be raised up, so it's different. And so, and I said, just think about the Gospels. Luke, John, Mark, Matthew. They came from different regions, but their story was different, but it all pointed to the one thing. All pointed to Jesus. And so just look at it that way. It all points to Jesus. So I want to close and share with you a painting that was created by Virginia Seminary professor, art instructor. And so this painting was recently, the larger painting is inside the Hojon Center, But this is the indigenous Navajo Jesus that the people identify with, that they have a relationship with. And that Jesus, again, is surrounded by the rainbow and the protection way, the beauty way. So this is the shalom way of Jesus. And here you probably could see like Bluff, those who've been in Bluff. There's the Bluff Mountains. Over here would be the New Mexico mountains. It looks a little gray. And then you have also the bluffs over at Good Shepherd Mission area in the Arizona. So they have more of a reddish color. And then you have the dawn, and you have the little lamb. And I don't know if, I have a sheep camp that I still run to this day. And it's about, it's been through my family from my paternal grandmother, and after my paternal grandmother passed on, it was given to my dad, and then my dad, when he passed on, gave it to my mom. And so my mom is now in her elderly years, and she said, I think you're the one to carry this forward. So I said, all right, well, it's a big responsibility hauling water to sheep where there's no running water, and you got to go to the well and draw water for the sheep and feed them and be out there with them out in the desert all day long with a backpack. And I actually had a priest one year come out and did a sabbatical out there and was amazed at the spirituality of what sheep can do for you, that they provide you with sustenance, that the spiritual sustenance that you need for your healing. And it's still the same, like when we come to the table and we receive the bread, it's that spiritual sustenance that Jesus gives us for our own well-being, for our healing, so that when we leave this place, we know how to give that away to another person who's going to need it. So the sheep is very sacred to us. We still butcher sheep, like for ceremonies or for any kind of events, or even when we get the hiccups and we say, oh, I think I'm craving some lamb, or maybe lamb fat, and we'll have a celebration and we'll celebrate a feast together. But they give their life up for you so that you can live, and that they're very, very smart. When I'm out there was herding sheep, when I used to have time to herd sheep, now I have a sheep herder. So when I used to be out there all day, I remember I used to take out a book and read, and all of a sudden they were just right here and they're gone. And I'm standing there looking around the land looking for them, and I'm like, okay, where did they go? Which direction? I was so caught up in my reading that I lost track of them. But of course I have sheepdogs, and they're not going to bark or anything like that to let me know where they are. But the one thing that I relied on was I discovered that crows were actually helpful creatures. One year I saw some crows flying, and I thought, okay, I think they might be that way. So I started walking. Sure enough, right as I got over the hilltop and down below, it's like a little grazing area. They were right down in that area. I was like, wow. I thought I was going to be walking all over the land trying to look for them, but they're very intuitive, and they know your needs. And so this is why the little lamb. So this sheep camp is actually the painter, the artist, drew the sheep camp that is out at my sheep camp, because she sat inside the corral with them for them to trust her to do the sketch. And so this is a really beautiful way of sharing the landscape. And of course you have the sage, and then around here is each of the elements. You have the 4 sacred mountains in each of the areas, and then you have your sacred creation story creatures. So we have the horse, we got the turkey, we got the bear, we have the mountain lion, we have the horned toad, and we have the coyote. And these are corn stalks on the side. And then here is the ceremonial basket, the corn pollen pouch, the sage, or cedar, sage, and the shell, abalone shell that we carry. The abalone shell represents the western direction, because when the sun starts to go down, I don't know, but where I live, you can see the twilight. It starts to look like abalone, all those many colors of the shell. So that's why we use the abalone shell for that. And then of course the eagle feather. So these are all sacred, and these are prints that we have for purchase as well. But the main painting sits in our Pojon Center in the diocesan office. So I just wanted to share the spirituality story of the painting. And other than that is what I have to share with you about history, about ministry, and about spirituality, living into harmony and balance. Where we find harmony and balance in our spirituality is doing the work of Christ. Sometimes it may not be, it could be really hard. It could be sad. It could be challenging. There's suffering in it. But somehow we find a joy. And that joy is your, like when someone once said to me, when your eyes well up, or when you have like a lump in your throat or something, whether it's sadness or just happiness, and you feel it, you connected to a divine. So when people lose loved ones and they're grieving, they're tapping into divine. When you have a grandchild and you're full of joy, you've tapped into the divine. So it's a both and. And I think that's the gift that the people of the Nithikea can give. And I just want to say thank you for your support. Thank you for wanting to be here and to learn, and because that's how we learn to be relational people together. Thank you.
And we have a wonderful meal, but let's take some time for questions. You've got to be super loud because we've got people wanting to see and hear on this video, which I hope will come out. Thank you, Gingy. So question for the Reverend Canon Cornelia Eaton. Please.
Could you talk about the mission and your work with children? Are children affected by what you're doing, and how does that work in relation to the schools on the reservation?
Yeah, well, the work with children around schools, I think that, each of the regions in Navajoland have like children's, beginning to work with children's ministries. But one of the things that I think we're looking at as far as children and youth is how do we preserve the Navajo language? And because the Navajo language is preserved through, obviously you have to speak it all the time, because the way we learn is through our hearing. And when you hear the language, then they catch on. And so, and one of the other ways that we're helping our young people is through, like right now, we're working on translation of the Book of Common Prayer and translating it into Diné in Navajo. So when we get these things in place, and that's another ministry of its own, because you're getting other people to participate in that. And so when we continue to speak to our children in Navajo and share with them, then our hope is that they would catch on and to learn. But right now, I know that a lot of the children are learning like through preschools or through public schools, that they have language classes that they can continue to learn as well as part of, I think that the school systems are providing as well. So I don't know if that's part of your question that you were asking around justice with the young kids, with children. Well, and the other thing that was really important through the Hojon Center is every year we have, every winter, we have what I call winter stories. And winter stories is actually, I get like 4 elders to tell a sacred story about something that they can tell during the winter time. And those are educational ways that we can educate our children. You sit with them together and they listen to the elders. And if the elder is speaking in Navajo and say the children don't understand Navajo, then we'll have to have an interpreter there to tell the children. But as long as the children can hear and listen. And one of the things that is really important to tell the children is, even though there are some who can't speak the language, they feel shame. They feel like maybe, you know, and we have to, it's not their fault, you know? And so the way I like to share something with young people or a youth who's not able to speak Diné is I said, can you say Ya'ate? And they say, yeah, I can say Ya'ate. Can you say Hagonet? Yeah, I can say Hagonet. You just tapped into the language. And the holy people know that you're doing your best. So if you say Shema, which is my mother, Shema Sana, my grandmother, Shache, my grandfather, Shanale, my paternal grandfather, then you're doing great. But we have much more work to do. There is that, you know, like, how can you be a Christian when after what has happened to you? How can you be a priest and be a part of what Christianity did to our children, you know, in terms of boarding schools and doing away with language and all that. So there are that there are those you know, questions that are brought to us, and so the way we answer them is that you know, when we come together as a community, the important part of the process is to really listen to each other, even the questions that our communities may ask, and to sit with them and to talk with them, and to know that you know, there's a lot of work to be done towards healing and reconciliation, and that as Diné clergy, as Diné leadership in Navajoland, we're here to provide that. And one of the most important things is that when the church acknowledged that their participation in the boarding schools was that an apology was made, but apology doesn't really, I mean, it's an acknowledgement, but there's more to do to that. There's more to it. So that's where the action comes into doing the work of this healing and reconciliation. It doesn't take away what has happened. I mean, you have to allow the people to be where they are with it, and not say that, oh, it's going to get better now. You know, there's not any of that. But you have to just be with them in that whole pain and process, so that when they're ready And they may not ever be ready, but you do know that that relationship building is going to take a long time.
We got time for one more question. And before we even get to that, I've just been told that there is plenty of food for everybody. So even if you haven't signed up, please do stay and join us. One of the things when we've been out to the Navajo Nation is the extraordinary hospitality we've received there. And so we're just emulating what we've received from you. One more question, please.
Through all the emotional pain that is multi-generational over all these years, what resources are you getting from the outside to help with behavioral health for mental health care? There's so many levels of that. I'm a retired nurse, and I got to a conference that was related to and there's a lot of need. And I was just wondering if you've got resources.
Yeah, there are plenty of resources to connect with, and I think as part of our ministry is to reach out to the resources that are available to us through behavioral health, through federal, or either through our communities, and so like Indian Health Services, and but we also have through the Episcopal Church, there's ministries like through recovery ministries or health ministries that are available. So I think really networking with behavioral health is important, because I know that when I first started the Hojon Beautyway Center with Bishop Dave, we had folks who were directors of like behavioral health centers, like areas where counseling was being provided. So we got professionals to help us to begin what it is that we need to do to meet the needs of the mental health needs of the people, So that's where we continue to look for resources. We look for partnerships. We look for networking and ways that we can be provided with the spiritual needs that we can be able to offer to the people. Because I know that the mental behavioral health could be different from the spiritual part, right? So the Granite for the Episcopal Church in Navajoland Hojon Center is the spiritual part, but also learn to intertwine with the medical needs of mental health needs together. So I think it's a both-and relationship that we really need to work on and build on together. Yeah.
Great. And of course, she's not going anywhere. She's joining us for dinner. So again, thank you all for coming. Thank you. And we move into the other room to feast. And I just want to say, short of going there, and we don't do mission trips anymore. We don't go just to build things. When we go, we learn, and part of the learning is to hear some of this truth telling, which we have a lot to answer for as Americans and as the church. And so it's so delightful to hear you speak, because it helps us to cast the work that we're doing as part of that healing and part of that reconciliation. And we can't really do that until we hear some of these tough truths. You are very gracious in the way you explain them, but do please stay afterwards. And finally, just again, let us show our gratitude to Canon and Cornelia Eaton. And to the parish hall to eat.